I'm getting ready to cook a meal. So I have my recipe right here accessible where I can view it. Today we're making taco meat. So you can use a taco meat when you're finished, however you like, in a burrito, in a taco, in a quesadilla. I have all of my supplies gathered. I've read my instructions, gathered my ingredients, and now I'm ready to cook. I have 2 items I should wash before I cut them. A red bell pepper and a small onion. I chose a red bell pepper because they're a little sweeter than a green bell pepper or a yellow bell pepper. So first I'm going to wash them. Washing fresh produce before using it gets all of the germs from the grocery store off, anything from the farm or transporting it, so they're fresh and clean to use. And then I'll use my knife to dice these ingredients for my filling. If you aren't comfortable using a knife, that is fine. There are other ways you can prepare these ingredients. I've been cooking for a while. I'm comfortable using a knife. There are also alternatives. There are nylon knives that are really nice to use. I can show you in a minute how to use that. There are smaller knives that have different grips that you may be comfortable using. And this knife even comes with a guard for your other hand. So then when you're dicing and cutting, your fingers are protected. And there's a style of knife like this where you go up and down and your fingers are out of the way. So if you aren't comfortable using a knife like this, there are a lot of different methods and alternatives. It doesn't mean you can't cook if you don't like knives. So for the bell pepper, trim the top and the bottom, and then it flips flat. It's not wobbly, it's safe to cut. And then just down the middle. These trim pieces, I don't need them, so I'm going to set them aside. And then I'm going to use my fingers to tear out the seeds and that white membrane. There we go. And a nice trick to use with peppers is you can even use scissors to cut these. So first I'm going to cut them into strips. It's really easy. Scissors work great for pepper. And then, because I want small pieces for my taco filling, I'm going to cut them again. The small rectangle pieces, small squares, so they cook nicely. If I put them in strips, it would take a long time to cook. So when you dice peppers and onions, it doesn't take as long for them to cook. You still have to be careful with cooking scissors, but they can be a little bit easier to use. I'm going to cut this piece a little bit more. Make sure you use a cutting board and that it's secure to the countertop so it's not sliding on you when you're cutting. Okay, that section is diced. Even though the scissors are really great to use, I will show you how some of these other options work. So this is a nylon knife. So it doesn't cut my fingers, but it should cut the pepper. And it does. It's a little bit tougher, takes a little bit more muscle, but it works just fine, especially if you aren't a fan of using a knife. So this works really well too. Easy peasy. This option you hold like this and cut up and down, so I could even do a couple at once. That cuts really well. Cuts it into pieces. I'm going to have to tear them a little bit, but that works. And then this option is advertised for kids. It doesn't mean anyone else can't use it either. And it's a real knife, so you have to be careful. It is sharp. I can use a finger guard, so I don't worry about my fingers getting cut. And that's a nice option too. I hold it pretty steady. So experiment with different cutting items and tools. You can find one that you're comfortable with, that you like. I think scissors are pretty easy. I like using them. Okay, the pepper is ready. I'm just going to empty the pepper into a dish so I can set it aside. I still have room on my cutting board for the onion I need to cut. And next is my small onion. If you have a medium or a larger size onion, that's okay too. You can just use half of it. So I'm going to cut the top and the bottom just like I did with my pepper. And it's sturdy, it's not wobbling around. Then I'm just going to try to cut the outside edge. And that will help me peel the outer layer off. It's ready to use. First, I'm going to cut it in half. It's solid, not wobbling around. Cut it in half. There are two different ends to the onion. There's an end that's a little bit more yellow and an end that's a little bit more green. The yellow end is the base. Oops, dice on one side, not all the way through, so it's still held together. And then I can cut across to dice the onion. You can also buy diced onion already from the grocery store. It's a little bit more expensive, but that can be an option too. It may take some practice, but you can do it. Onions do have a tougher skin, so let's see if our nylon knife works for Ian. Oh yeah, it works. It takes a little bit more muscle, but it definitely works. That's a really nice option. Okay, our onion is ready. Now I'm ready to go to the stove. I have a metal pan that I'm going to use to cook this, and so then I'm going to use a metal spatula. A tip with cooking is to use metal on metal, and then if I had a non-stick or one of those pans that have like a black on the bottom that keeps things from sticking on it, I would want to use a plastic spatula. So plastic on plastic, metal on metal. Getting my pan ready. My recipe calls for 1 tablespoon of oil in my pan. I have my measuring spoon. It's the largest in a set is a tablespoon. So I have my 4 options here, and the largest is a tablespoon. And now I'm ready to turn on my stove. So I'm going to look at my stove. I'm going to see where my pan is and match it up to the dial that controls that location and turn it on. I need it on about medium to start. It's red, so it's on. I'm not going to touch it. It's hot. I'm going to let my oil warm up a little bit for about a minute. And then I'm going to put my onions in. should start cooking here soon. My pan warms up. Okay, my onions have started to sizzle. They're starting to cook. I'm going to add my bell pepper. And let all of this cook for a couple minutes until they get soft. You start to smell them. And you know an onion is cooked or getting close to being cooked when they turn a little bit translucent. You can see through them a little bit more. So it's cooking well. I'll let that cook and grab my meats. I have beef, but you can use turkey or any other ground meat that you prefer. So I've used these scissors on meats. That means they're contaminated. I'm going to put them in the sink so I know to wash them before using them again. You don't want to mix anything you've used on raw meat with anything else because it spreads bacteria and it can make you sick. So this is ready. My veggies are cooking. If you don't like onion or bell pepper, you don't have to use it in your filling. It just gives it some flavor. There's some nice nutritional benefits of red bell pepper. A way to eat some veggies, maybe. I want my onions and peppers cook a little longer. My onions are getting translucent. I can tell they're getting a little bit see-through. They're getting cooked. I'm going to add my meat. I'm going to throw away the container. Once I add my meat, I'm going to use my spatula and break up the beef. Just try to crumble it up, chunk it a little bit. And right now you see that your meat is pink and you want to brown it. So this is a term for cooking called browning. I'm just getting all of this pink meat. I'm going to cook it until it's brown. I'm breaking it up into little pieces, crumbling it up. So after I crumble all of this meat, it's looking good. Mix it all in with the vegetables. I'm going to turn up my heat just a little bit so it gets really brown, cooking the meat. So you can see some of my meat is pink, some of it's brown. I want all of my meat brown. So I'm going to cook it longer. I like cooking ground meat because it's easy to see when it's done. I don't have to guess, is it done, is it finished? It can be complicated or a little tricky sometimes. But when you cook ground meat in a pan, you can tell. Now let that cook some more. The meat will let off some liquid or some fat, that's okay. That's part of the cooking process. Now it's mostly brown, but a little bit of pink still, so I'm going to keep cooking. Okay, that's pretty brown. I don't really see any big pink pieces. I see most of the meat is brown. It's done. My recipe says to remove some of the fat or the liquid with a spoon. I purchased lean meat. There's really not that much liquid. It will be fine, so I'm just going to leave it. So you don't always have to follow every single step of a recipe. The person who wrote the recipe isn't here with you cooking. Some meat may have more liquid or fat in it, and you would have to take it out, but I don't have too much liquid. It'd be hard to get it with a spoon, so I'm just going to leave it. Next are beans. I'm going to add an entire can of beans. This can is black beans, but you can use pinto beans, kidney beans, whatever you have in your pantry or would like to use. I probably wouldn't use baked beans, but that might be nice too. I don't know. I just opened my can with the can opener. I'm going to add the whole can, including the juice, in my pan. And then I'll rinse this out and recycle it. Stir it all up. Mix all of my ingredients. And now comes the seasoning. So I've added the beans. I'm going to turn that down a little bit. I'm just mixing the flavors. I'm not necessarily cooking everything. So now my seasoning. My recipe calls for 2 tablespoons of ground cumin. This is a pretty common seasoning for Mexican food or Tex-Mex food. So I'm using my big tablespoon measuring spoon. 1, 2. Next, it says 2 tablespoons of ground chili powder. This gives it a really nice taco flavor. 1. It's not too spicy. It's not like a different type of spicy pepper. It's just a pepper for flavor. And then salt. My recipe calls for half a teaspoon of salt, so I'm going to find my half teaspoon measure. It says 1/2 TSP, half a teaspoon, and add that in. Salt is one of those things you can have an opinion on. It's different for everyone, so I'm going to start with half a teaspoon. I may want to add some more salt later. That's okay. Mix all of this up. And then my recipe says turn the heat down to low and simmer for 10 minutes. A simmer is not, it's a slow kind of bubbling. Not too high, not too low. So that's a simmer. There's some bubbling, but they're not too fast. You can hear it, but it's not active. Just some bubbling, gentle. Okay. And then it says to let that simmer for 10 minutes. I'm going to set my timer. I can use a watch, or a lot of times there's a timer on an oven, or a phone, or a kitchen timer can work too. Even though it's 10 minutes, I should not just leave the room. That would be unsafe. Because I still want to keep an eye on the stove. If there's a heat source going and the stove is on, I don't want to forget about it on the stove. So I'm going to set my timer, and then I can start cleaning up some of my things in the kitchen. I'm not going to leave this alone though. I'm going to watch it. But I can do other things. Okay, it's been 10 minutes. My filling looks done. Still has some liquid, but not completely dry. Everything looks blended together. Now turn my oven off. Make sure my entire cooked surface is off. There isn't a burner on anymore. And then I have a dish I'm going to empty my filling into. The pan will be heavy, so be careful. If you feel more comfortable using a spoon, you can use a spoon. And now I'm ready to eat. I can put this filling in a taco, put some cheese and sour cream on it. I can make a taco salad with some lettuce. I could make a quesadilla. So this filling is really versatile and use it however you want. It's nice to eat it with more than one person because each person can make it their own, put what they like on top of their taco. Everyone's happy. I'm going to wash all my dishes from cooking. And you get hot water. Hot water will clean really well, kill bacteria. Clean out my sink so I have clean water. Okay, it's getting warm. Plug it up. Add my dish soap. It'll get bubbly and fuzzy. Make sure that you take any of your sharp items out of the water. You don't want to be reaching down in your soapy water and accidentally grab something sharp. You don't need too much water, just enough to clean the dishes you have. Use my rag and scrub both sides and edges. I'll rinse the soap off and set it aside to dry. Be careful washing your knives, the sharp items. Hold the knife so the sharp edge is away from you and not towards you. That is not safe. This is safe. The last step is to clean your countertops. Make sure they're clean. And then make sure your stove isn't hot and you can clean your stove. Empty out your water. Rinse out your rag. And you're finished.